Well, it's official. Aday Mara heading to Michigan. Londynn Jones in the portal, and a whole bunch of UCLA recruits officially signing with the Bruins via the transfer portal. Let's talk about it.
You are Locked On UCLA, your daily podcast on the UCLA Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to this edition of the Locked On UCLA podcast. I'm your host, Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer. Thanks for making this show your first listen each and every day. It's free wherever you get your podcast, and it's available on YouTube. Like, comment, subscribe, download. Thanks for your support. It's your team every day. Today, a rivalry is born of sorts, which is what's going to happen in the transfer portal era, right? You've got players leaving, players coming in, whether it's new NIL deals, extra years of eligibility, which I've already talked about earlier this week, but let's remind you, Aday Mara was reported to go to Michigan with the crystal ball I said from Joe Tipton of On3, and as official of April 11th, I've seen Jonathan Givney of the NBA Draft Express, Joe Tipton of On3, both report that Aday Mara is heading to Michigan. All right, so maybe that's older news, maybe that's old news, maybe that's new news to you if you've been just checking out the podcast, but that's big news for UCLA. It's not like Aday went overseas and stayed in Spain. It's not like he tested the NBA draft waters, which he might do in 2026 if he becomes a potential first rounder in the NBA draft next year. Nor did he go and play professionally overseas. He instead not only went to the transfer portal, he found himself in the same conference against one of the main sources of competition for UCLA in 2025 to 2026. If UCLA is to win a Big Ten title next year, to go deeper in the Big Ten tournament, maybe if they meet in the NCAA tournament, of course, is looking way down the line, Aday Mara is a part of Dusty May's squad, all right? And he is committed via the transfer portal to Michigan. All right. Now, if you watched this podcast a couple days ago, we did talk about Aday Mara potentially going to Michigan. He was crystal ball there. Now he has committed there, according to Jonathan Givney and now Joe Tipton of On3. First, what does that mean for UCLA? Well, I'm going once again back to UCLA is still garnering love and hype for top 10 potential in this upcoming season. Yet, on the same day where Mara heads to the portal, UCLA announces their 3 signees that are not Donovan Dent. That includes Steven Jamerson, Jamar Brown, and Xavier Booker, who are all going to be key pieces, hopefully, to UCLA's success next year. Now, this is a UCLA team that, let's remind you, is returning Eric Dailey Jr., arguably the most important player to UCLA's success last year when he had good games. The Bruins generally did not lose. Tyler Bilodeau, of course, leading scorer. You need him to come back. Oh, Skyy Clark, a guy who seemed to figure out what he was doing at the end of the season in terms of, all right, let's shoot the ball more. Cronin was building his confidence, and it's great that he returns for another season. You bring in the already announced, already signed Donovan Dent, return Trent Perry, some youngsters returning like Brandon Williams coming off the redshirt year, Eric Freeney, who will have his first season of college basketball playing time prepared. But this is a team that's going to have to go through teams with significant size or teams that have already gotten through the transfer portal and gotten some major additions to the side, some of which stealing, quote unquote, stealing, transferring from UCLA to Michigan. So again, I was looking at the John Rothstein top 45, various top 10s, way too early top 10s that are updated with NBA draft status, transfer portal, guys returning, guys leaving. And the consensus now is that Houston's going to be number 1, right? You got Uzan, who is staying. You got Pop Isaacs. You got a lot of talent for a team that just finished shy of winning the national championship in Houston. Number 2, that's Purdue, all right? Purdue's a scrappy ball club, returning Braden Smith. They've got Trey Kaufman-Red, and they brought in Oscar Clough. So you talk about a team that's either number 1 or number 2 in the Big Ten preseason rankings for another consecutive year. A team that was a 1 seed, went to the national championship game 2 years ago, has a lot of veteran savvy in their backcourt and on their staff with Matt Painter. It's a team that you mix in Oscar Clough. That's a big man they got in the portal to get much better, all right? Last year was kind of not the same. Kaufman-Red certainly ate up UCLA, but Clough adds another wrinkle, another dynamic for the Purdue Boilermakers. All right, you keep going down that top 5, and you see Michigan's now slotted as the number 4. If you look at Michigan's starting 5 against UCLA, you would notice that a lot of those guys aren't even there. Trey Donaldson, a surprising leave to Miami, just as Aday Mara was a surprising to leave UCLA to go to Michigan. Donaldson left, and he dominated UCLA. Danny Wolf is gone. You have Lad Golden gone, who dominated the Bruins to the tune of 36 points, a game where UCLA barely used Aday Mara. If you remember in early January when Cronin went on his tirade about his players being delusional and soft, and his team got pounded to the tune of 94-75, a game where UCLA actually led with about 14 minutes left in the game. They were down big, came all the way back, led. This was when all the wildfires were going on, but it just started, so it wasn't as big of a national story just yet, and everything was going on with UCLA. A little bit banged up, just coming off the Nebraska game. We thought the hype was real after UCLA beating Gonzaga. And then Cronin calls his guys soft and delusional, which is funny because when you pair the rumored listed demands of Aday Mara, right? When you think about their lack of success during that time, about whether the Mara story coming out of him being, wanting to go to Spain every time from Bro Report, whether it's him, whatever it is, whatever led to the departure, isn't it all funny that you tie in that statement with the demands, whether they be true or not, and the fact that he goes to Michigan? Isn't that kind of funny? And it's the team that had the size, the 7-foot point guard, the 7-foot center, that used that to dominate the Bruins, and now UCLA is losing their source of size going to Michigan. Well, you look at Michigan, they have a transfer point guard in Elliot Cadeau. That's their starting guard. Ronnie Gale, that's a guy that did not play versus UCLA. He was out, but he is a key returning piece for Michigan. They have Yaxel Lendenberg, who is somebody that will either be with Michigan or head to the NBA, shifting Morez Johnson from Illinois, a guy UCLA, if they wanted to take a deeper look at, could have been a small ball 5 and a great option for the Bruins. Instead, that's 3 top bigs that Dusty May has gotten in the portal, any of which UCLA could have gotten out and either kept or gone after between Lendenberg, Johnson, or keeping their own in Aday Mara. And instead, those are 3 guys all fighting for time. And even if one of those guys leaves to the NBA draft, like Yaxel, that would mean Michigan is still set in their starting 5 with Mara, or at least if he comes off the bench, if Dusty May plays the Mick Cronin card, that would be interesting. And you see what UCLA's running with. They're running with a project potentially at center in Xavier Booker, who I remember I talked to you about my Spartan source, someone who would watch the Michigan State games and kind of gave me the 1-2, how he's going from a similar coach to a similar coach. Xavier Booker, the one-time Super 5-star, one of the highest rated recruits in Tom Izzo's class, one of the 3 incoming transfers that have been announced by UCLA as of this recording of this podcast on April 11th, 2025, to come in. He's that guy that UCLA might be running with. John Rothstein, early prediction for a UCLA team that stands to be a top 10. Booker could be that center. Move Dailey to the 3, Bilodeau to the 4, and have Skyy Clark as the 2. Or, as we know Mick Cronin would probably do, put Bilodeau as the 5, Dailey as the 4, and showcase either Brown or Trent Perry as that starting 3 guard, mixing things around with Donovan Dent running the show, and UCLA still a capable team if Bilodeau's the 5. Not their full potential, but a capable top 10 roster. Exciting with what's coming in between Brown from UMKC, Booker, and Steven Jamerson. And hopefully all those parts together can, over the course of the year, build up to what Michigan was spending in the portal, what other teams have gone after in the portal, and UCLA spent upwards of the reported $3 million to go get Donovan Dent. And I wonder what the other 3 cost. And just retaining their players, I wonder what that cost. So you look at what UCLA is going to battle with, it'll be size in some of these teams. And that doesn't include Michigan State still also being a potential top 10 team in this way too early top 25. And I know I've been going a lot of these way too early rankings, but you look at it, the Big Ten, a year after the SEC dominated college basketball, is the Big Ten next year going to dominate, right? We saw the Big Ten, they've stolen the spotlights. They've stolen the storylines of the last couple of seasons with college football, of course, for various different reasons, whether it be the sign stealing scandal, whether it be the $20 million roster. The top 2 teams, last couple of seasons, top few teams have all been from the Big Ten and there's been depth there. And that could be the same thing in the Big Ten heading to the next season, where 4 of the projected top 10 teams include UCLA, Michigan, Michigan State, and Purdue. And some of those teams have size. Michigan State has to learn how to shoot a lot better from year to year. And I think UCLA's got a weird combination of some decent shooters, some defense, and potential size. Now they have the standout at point guard. They've got a demanding head coach in Cronin. But it is interesting seeing how Aday's movement to Michigan, on top of the demands, and if those are even true, on top of the Cronin comments way back in January, how it all connects. And it leads to a huge game whenever UCLA plays Michigan. If you listened to the podcast a couple of days ago, I was talking about the Big Ten Conference should have UCLA and Michigan play twice. Now what they do is they have regional rivalries, if you will, to limit the travel for the teams. So UCLA most likely wouldn't play Michigan twice, and they would be scheduled most likely to go to Ann Arbor this next season. They have to return that game to Poly. They have to send Michigan west. Do it in December. It's okay. Even if the students are gone for finals or they're on winter break after the quarters. No. It's okay. Throw them early in the season when everybody's traveling for the early holidays or the Thanksgivings or the Christmases or whatever holiday. During that season, send them to UCLA, easily sold out game, in a primetime matchup in a blown out of proportion storyline, which would be exciting, either side, but would be fun to watch anyways. Make it happen. Make it happen, Big Ten, where both these two teams could play. What we do know, according to Jon Rothstein, though, is another potential top 15 battle in the early non-conference slate next year between UCLA and Arizona. Let's talk about that next and how that could play a role in potential Southern California recruiting ties. Next on Locked On UCLA. This is a message from sponsor Intuit TurboTax. Taxes is waiting and wondering and worrying if you're going to get any money back, and then waiting and wondering and worrying some more. Now Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who can give your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will find every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. Also, you can get the most money back guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now this is Taxes. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live Full Service. Real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. Okay, here we go. Rolling on here on Locked On UCLA. Jon Rothstein reporting earlier today that according to his sources, UCLA Arizona will be taking place on November 14th. So, UCLA fans, that means one, get your tickets. And then you're like, wait, Zach, what does that mean? Where would they be playing? Well, Jon Rothstein of CBS Sports reporting that UCLA will take on Arizona at the Intuit Dome in LA November 14th. Now remember, they had this agreement, right? They have the UCLA-Gonzaga agreement where UCLA is supposed to go to Spokane or close nearby. And actually, I think it's Seattle. It's actually Climate Pledge Arena, right? UCLA hosted Gonzaga, hosted, if you will, in the Intuit Dome. And UCLA, I think, is supposed to go play the Zags in Seattle pretty soon. Now, this next season between UCLA and Arizona, the game is in the Intuit Dome. It sucks that we just can't go to the McKell Center and they can't come to Poly, but such is the life of college basketball. All these negotiations from players who were literally on rosters playing in the Final Four or in the national championship game or in the Sweet 16 a week or a week two ago, and now they're on different teams making many millions of dollars in NIL money, and that these teams can't even play home and home games where these schools already upcharge for ticket spikes, taxes, if you will, or percentage spikes to go as player revenue, right? To help fund the NIL collective when they're playing in neutral site places. Now, let me tell you, I've been to the Intuit Dome. If you've not been to the Intuit Dome, it's awesome. It is fantastic. Fan-freaking-tastic. It's a great arena. It is up there with some of the best arenas in the world. So if you can go watch UCLA play there and make sure that the Arizona Wildcat fans don't go in there and overrun the UCLA fans. No. And if I'm looking at way too early top 25, I'm looking at Jon Rothstein's, and it says you expect UCLA, as I've already said, top 10, top 5, top 10 team whichever you look at. Depending whether you're looking at USA Today, ESPN, or in this case, Rothstein has UCLA at 7 and has Arizona right now as 12. So basically, by the time UCLA would face Arizona in the opening week of the season, could be a pair of 2 top 10 teams, maybe 2 top 15 teams, depending on the early rankings, which mean lots or little. We saw the UCLA win over Arizona early in the season was a springboard for some more success. The following week, the Bruins were able to keep going with their success. They did go beat Oregon, beat Arizona, and we're like, wait a minute, this team could do some things this year. And those were games won away from home by UCLA, at Eugene against the Oregon Ducks, in Phoenix against the Arizona Wildcats, who next year, their projected starting 5, you say goodbye to Caleb Love, you say goodbye to Henry Vasar going to North Carolina. They're going to bring in a very youthful lineup. Between the expected Jaden Bradley, Braden Burries, Koa Pete, they'll be bringing back Krivas, who was injured when UCLA played them last year, leading to the breakout season from Vasar. And there will be no more KJ Lewis. There'll be no more Caleb Love. Last year's transfer sensation in Trey Townsend from Oakland, the team that upset Kentucky, sent Coach Cal to Arkansas. So you're going to see a lineup that involves 2 of the youngest players on the West Coast, whether it's Pete or Burries, and UCLA didn't get either one of those. And with this game set to be in Los Angeles, recruits are going to have their eyes on it. It's very early in the high school season, if not a break or two in early November 14th. That's probably very beginning. I forget when the high school basketball season starts in California, but that's right when they're ramping up practice time. You're telling me that these guys, when they're in the ID, that's when UCLA is going to start ramping up for 27s, for 26s. They had 0 2025 commits. And Arizona has 2 elite prospects right in UCLA's recruiting backyard, just like in Arizona. Now, we can all argue whether these players might stay after a year or two. And this is not just the case for Arizona or UCLA. This is across the country. You can get a youngster and they're not going to stay. You can play them for 2 years or develop them for 2 years and they're not going to stay. But even having them on your roster for a year to develop or provide some depth or be an immediate impact like Cooper Flagg was, is that what Cole Pete can be? Is that what Braden Burries could be? Burries is a guy in a position where UCLA needed a guy of his size, his stature, his ability, and maybe could have worked well with Mick Cronin. Had one of the best California State Championship game performances of all time, and now he's heading out there to Arizona with some other youngsters from the SoCal recruiting ranks on their roster as well and some returning talent. So a game between UCLA and Arizona that early in the season could maybe swing things in the following year's recruiting battle. Or, as we saw this year, Arizona got red hot after some early struggles and found themselves with some strong footing in the Big 12. And that was a huge win for UCLA, a quad 1 win away from home. And technically this would register way too early as the same thing, a neutral site game that helps both teams' metrics, right? Because if it's a top 75 team on a neutral site, you're going to get a lot more benefit toward it leaning to a quad 1 game. If it's a home game, then that team's got to be really, really good for it to qualify as a quad 1 game, which is how it helps for UCLA, like it helped Arizona last year, a team coming in a neutral site home game that can help the metrics, which is sometimes where those are skewed a little bit. If you're looking at the net rankings, like Arizona's playing a home game against UCLA in Phoenix, so it's going to be 95% Arizona fans, but it's a quad 1 game regardless of how UCLA most likely would do. Same thing for the Bruins. Going to be a quad 1 game most likely since it's a neutral site home game, but it's an unofficial home and home. So that would help UCLA in Arizona and be a huge game in terms of, all right, can UCLA take it to Arizona? Be the second time that these teams face off as big-time non-conference rivals. And we'll continue to see this. I wonder if UCLA is going to go to a Thanksgiving tournament, if they're going to travel far, or will they go as far as Vegas? Or will they, UCLA is going to play these games early in the season, close to home. Last year, it was in the local Las Vegas greater area, right? I think it might have been in Henderson that game last year against New Mexico. They're going to play that in the local area. They're not going to go travel all the way across the country until they have to in Big Ten play. And they might maybe change things in this upcoming non-conference schedule for TV revenue or for a big tournament. But for now, last year, UCLA to play a bunch of mid-majors at home, and those big games against Arizona, North Carolina, they're most likely going to be neutral site games shifted around where those games might be. Now, November 14th, according to John Rothstein, UCLA takes on the Cats of Arizona in the Intuit Dome. Get ready to rock and roll, because that will be an absolute rockin' atmosphere. It's a great arena. I encourage you to check it out. Speaking of check it out, UCLA, it's official. We do lose Londynn Jones to the transfer portal. Does that mean she could return? Possibly, but they're not the only team losing players to the portal of significance. South Carolina lost one too. Let's talk about that. And can UCLA recruit said player? All next on Locked On UCLA. Well, here we go. What's UCLA women's basketball going to do? All right. With Talia Goodman confirming Londynn Jones' entry into the portal from On 3, and also the fact that Janiah Barker has a do not contact tag in the transfer portal, UCLA, they're without some of their significant pieces, right? This is what UCLA will be missing next year. Let's go over it one more time. A team that's preseason number one, that's bringing in one of the best high school recruits in the country in Sienna Betts. Lena Bilic is another international recruit who hopefully could do as good, if not better, than Elena Arnasalo as an incoming true freshman, UCLA's last international recruit. That actually worked out pretty well in my mind. The Bruins are returning their three top scorers, Lauren Betts, who averaged 20 and 9, Kiki Rice, who averaged almost 13 points, 3 rebounds per game, and was the team's leader in assists by a wide margin. Then Gabriela Jaquez, just a shade under 10 points per game and 5 rebounds per game. But Londynn Jones is that fourth leading scorer, that shooter who can knock down the three, the team's leader in three-point makes, and then you lose in Janiah Barker, the Big Ten Sixth Player of the Year, an SEC All-First Teamer, and she goes to the portal. All right, that's what UCLA is losing out on. They still have their top three. Charlize Ledger-Walker is important as well. Gianna Neepkins, an important player coming for an official visit pretty soon from Talia Goodman. I talked about that in the last Locked On UCLA episode, who could fit what UCLA needs. But the Bruins aren't the only ones losing in the portal. They're not the only ones losing. South Carolina, MiLaysia Fulwiley, one of their key players who doesn't start, actually. Maybe a sixth player, maybe one of those players, like if you looked at Mick Cronin, you're like, why isn't Fulwiley starting? Dawn Staley had a local product on her team dominating. And according to the Greenville News, Lulu Kesson, she reported with breaking news right before I started recording that Fulwiley is heading to the transfer portal after 2 years at South Carolina. That's a player who in her 2 seasons played in almost 70-plus games, won a national championship, averaged 11 points per game in both of those seasons, and is dynamic on the court. If you see some of her highlight tape, fantastic. Played almost 80 games, 12 points per game, couple decent rebounding numbers, 3 rebounds per game, and has the flashy potential with the ability to affect defensively, right? Whether it's shots blocked or in her case, 60 steals in the season. Just over a steal, maybe a steal and a half on the season per game for Fulwiley in her first 2 years. Bigger guard, 5'10", and a local product from Columbia, South Carolina, which is interesting that after 2 seasons, a team that just made it to the national championship, a team that won it unbeaten in her freshman campaign, that she's leaving in the transfer portal. Makes one wonder, should UCLA go after a player like that? I wonder what her fit would be. It's probably similar to that of Janiah Barker, although I would believe her ball handling skills are a little more crisp than Barker's were coming to UCLA. Turnover numbers aren't something that you would like if you're a UCLA fan, considering the Bruins couldn't take care of the basketball, but the athleticism, the flashiness, the ability to have a different type of scorer, different type of ball handler, and a taller guard could be important for UCLA. Now, obviously, Barker being 6'3" versus Fulwiley being 5'10", that's one thing, but this is a player you look at, and also it kind of gives you a sense of relief, right? Felt like South Carolina, who just got the leading scorer in the country in the transfer portal, in Tania Latson, I should say, from Florida State, getting her in, seeing the Gamecocks lose somebody to the portal, you're like, okay, UCLA's not the only team losing players, and maybe this was something that was in the works, or it's just as much of a shock to Dawn Staley like it is to myself and maybe you listening or watching at home. It's like, oh, that's a key player that is ready to make a big jump into her junior season while UCLA is losing some talent. South Carolina is losing talent too. UConn, Paige Beckers is quote-unquote graduating / going to the NBA draft, not using that extra year of eligibility she could have. So each team is either missing or losing a player of significance, right? Notre Dame lost Olivia Miles. UCLA losing the Big Ten Sixth Player of the Year and one of their best three-point shooters in program history in Londynn Jones. Fulwiley leaving South Carolina. Beckers is going to the WNBA draft. Juju is out for a significant period of time for USC, while they've also lost some players to graduation and to the transfer portal. Like, okay, NC State won't be as good. TCU improved, but they lost two players like Van Lith and Sedona Prince. So every team is losing, just like they all do, to the portal, graduation, some going pro. And now it seemed like South Carolina, the one team that didn't seem like it had been affected by something as big and dramatic as a move like this could have been, Wiley hits the portal. I just hope UCLA, I'm not sure if this is necessarily a good fit for these two, for the player and for UCLA, considering Janiah Barker came in after a big role, had a reduced role, and she's already in the portal. Fulwiley would probably get stuck in a logjam between, Ledger Walker coming off of injury. You bring in Kiki Rice and Lauren Betts and Jaquez, all of which could be in the starting five. Dugalich, her next moves are unknown at this point for UCLA, while she has the next year of eligibility. Can the Bruins find a way to bring someone of this talent, of this caliber in? Yes, UCLA was extremely deep and had a stacked roster with Ledger Walker expected to play this last season until it was decided in December to January that she was not going to play and just use the medical redshirt. So they could stack talent like Fulwiley, which would help them more for the depth this season and potentially in a starting role once Kiki Rice is gone. Fulwiley would be one of those players where you ask her, hey, can you take a lesser role this year or a similar role like you played at South Carolina, coming off the bench for a top team in the country, and then when Kiki's gone, you have the basketball. Like, it's you. Because Ledger Walker will be gone. Somebody's got to feed the ball to Sienna Betts. Lauren Betts would be gone. Gabriella Jaquez was gone. Some of those key recruits for the class of 22 gone with Jones in the portal and with Janiah Barker in the portal. UCLA would need that somewhat senior leader that Fulwiley could be in that season. Now, this is all looking way too far ahead. That would be the case in the pitch Cori Close could make to somebody like Fulwiley. But the UCLA Bruins do have Lena Village, who is a bigger guard, 6'3" guard. You bring in Neepkins. You mix in some youth with some senior presence on this team, and that is what could put UCLA over the top to get them to their first national championship in the NCAA era of women's college basketball. But it is huge news that South Carolina is losing a significant piece to the transfer portal. The Bruins aren't the only ones. And just about every team has taken a hit with somebody leaving to the portal or going pro or graduation, which is how it should be. It'll be fun to see how Cori Close responds if the Bruins have another, or if they're like, we're actually set, it's addition by subtraction. Because they already have the commitments to those two players. They lost their entire freshman class of 2024. That's not often you say, oh, we just lost all 4 commits from a season ago and we're okay. That just doesn't happen. And here UCLA is the number 1 team in the country, pretty much all in for next year to win a national championship, maybe at the expense of their future, unless Close can expect the portal to stay as active as it's been these last few off seasons, in addition to finding some key recruits nationally and internationally, like she's been repeatedly, again and again and again. So I hope that continues. But Fulwiley is an interesting one. Not sure if that's a big fit at UCLA, but the pitch would be, come here with the idea of staying for 2 seasons, which is hard because players' minds and emotions change from year to year. Just like you could say Janiah Barker's did. She wanted to come to UCLA to win and take a lesser role, and eventually at the end leaves after a season at UCLA. Or if you have those players who stay for 3 years, Londynn Jones is in the portal when she was heading into her senior year. That just tells you how locked in UCLA is into this upcoming season to winning a national championship. Cori Close is pulling all the stops to make it happen, and that is immediately after they were embarrassed on national television by the current national champions, UConn. They're coming full force next season. I just wonder who will be on their roster when they go on the full-fledged redemption tour to make it happen. Until then, like, comment, subscribe, download. Thanks for your support. This has been the Locked On UCLA podcast. Tell me your thoughts. Like, comment, subscribe. And hey, getting close to a Friday night showcase for UCLA football. Big weekends for the UCLA baseball team in first place in Big Ten. You have the UCLA softball team, who has some big-time matchups this weekend. They are tied for first, heading into their weekend in the Big Ten. Good things for spring sports, big things for winter sports in the portal and the season wrapping up into the slow end of this academic calendar year. That's why you come to Locked On UCLA and enjoy. Okay, hands up, Bruins fans. 8 clap time, baby. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. UCLA. UCLA, fight, fight, fight. This has been Locked On UCLA. Zach signing off. Go Bruins.